who did he flee from is another question. Did he flee from the punishment that Allah was sending to his people, or was he fleeing from the people themselves? Who gave him permission to flee? No prophet in the Qur'an disobeys the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And no prophet is punished. In the same surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَقَدْ سَبَقَتْ كَلِمَتُنَا لِعِبَادِنَا الْمُرْسَلِينَ إِنَّهُمْ لَهُمُ الْمَنْصُورُونَ وَإِنَّ جُنْدَنَا لَهُمُ الْغَالِبُونَ. And our word has already preceded for our servants, the messengers. Indeed, they are victorious. And indeed, our soldiers will be those who overcome. This is in the same surah where it mentions Yunus a.s. fleeing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says, and this is based on Allah's choosing of those who will deliver the message to the people. He chooses the best people. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا كَانَ لِنَبِيٍّ أَن يَغُلَّ. And it is not attributable to a prophet that he should act unfaithfully. In other words, he doesn't betray. He doesn't breach his trusts. So to say Nabi Yunus left his mission would be contradictory to the Qur'an. To say that he fled because he thought a punishment was going to strike him, this is actually improper to believe this. A prophet would not be scared for himself because he would have full trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he will be given victory. Getting back to the word abbaka. Now the word abbaka is used when a servant runs away from somebody who's in charge of him. So let me explain this. In the past, there was actually what was known as indentured servitude, which is a form of labor, in which there was a contract where one person entered into it for a period of time, and he had to work under somebody else. And that person would take care of his needs, his living, his food. Sometimes this was for a long period of time, sometimes a short period of time, sometimes for his whole life. So it would depend on the situation. Quran, however, we do have examples of this. Actually, we have two examples of this. In this case, Nabi Yunus, where he fled his responsibilities, and I'll explain this, inshallah. Before I mention that, also Nabi Musa, alayhi salam, where he actually got into a contract where he stayed for 10 years to serve the father of his wife. And so the time he was in service of his father-in-law, we would say he was from indentured servitude. And there was obviously a contract also for marriage involved in that. So Yunus a.s., we know that he fled. And he fled actually when he became angry. In Surah Al-Anbiya, it mentions وَذَنُّونَ. We'll talk about this title, the Noon. And also there's another title is given, Sahib al-Hut. Traditionally, they've been considered the same thing, but actually they're different. And I'll explain this in a future lesson. وَذَنُّونِ إِذْ ذَهَبَ مُغَاضِبًا. And mention when Yunus, in this case, ذَهَبَ مُغَاضِبًا. He left while in a state of mutual anger. In other words, he was angry with the person he was working under, and that person was also angry with Yunus a.s. And Yunus a.s. made an ijtihad where he thought the person had broken the contract. He maybe oppressed him in some way or did something that warranted his anger, and he thought that this was enough and he wanted to leave. And he left. And Yunus a.s. thought he will not take him to task whatsoever about this. I mean, in other words, he was justified with leaving. Little did he know, however, he was going to go through a tribulation. And then from that tribulation, there was a massive opening for him. So the ayah continues, فَنَادَى فِي ظُلُمَاتِ. Notice here, فَنَادَى. In other words, when he left, it didn't say ثُمَّ نَادَى. فَنَادَى. In other words, it happened quite quickly. When he left, and he thought that Allah will not take him to task for what he did. فَنَادَى. Notice it happened quite quickly. So in other words, when he actually boarded the ship, and then when he went inside the whale, it happened quickly. فنادى في ظلمات أن لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. So the point I'm trying to make here is that Yunus Islam was not a prophet yet. And I'll show proof of this, inshallah, in a later lesson. And the point is, he fled from the person who was in charge of him. He had unfinished work and he fled. And I'm 100% sure he made amends for that. وصلى الله على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين.